Hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. George Simon, and welcome to another edition of the new Character Matters program. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we've faced for several decades now, and that affects every aspect of our lives, and what we can do to turn things around, what we must do to turn things around. Because everything, from our most intimate relationships to our world affairs, our community affairs, everything depends upon us restoring the importance of character and knowing how to instill, nurture, foster, and develop character in ourselves and in one another until we come to expect it again. Until we come to demand it in certain cases. We're going to continue to have relationships fall apart. We're going to continue to have so much division and discord. And we're going to continue to have so much egregious behavior, even in the face of law after law after law passed to try and mitigate the dysfunction. And today I want to talk about a topic that I've talked about before. But it's so important to continue talking about because there is so much misinformation available these days about it. And that topic is narcissism. There's a lot of information available these days about narcissistic personalities, and most of it contains some degree of truth, but a lot of misinformation as well. And so today I'd like to just kind of clear the air just a little bit. Especially I'd like to point to some of the erroneous labels being thrown about very loosely these days. And I also want to make 2 points, very important points. Number one, character dysfunction itself, character disturbance of one type or another, is a spectrum phenomenon. Like many other mental health and other conditions, we know that character disturbance occurs along spectra of both type and degree. In other words, there are varying degrees of seriousness of character dysfunction, and character dysfunction takes many different forms. So it is truly a spectrum phenomenon. Number two, narcissism. Narcissism is a feature in many different types of character dysfunction. When it comes to narcissism, one description does not fit all. Many character types have narcissism as a prominent feature in their character. Further, there are different types of narcissists. I explain this at great length in all my books, especially in Sheep's Clothing and in Character Disturbance. And these days, you can hear some really ridiculous formulations. I keep thinking of one particular description of the folks that I first described in my book In Sheep's Clothing years ago. Folks that I accurately labeled as covert aggressive because although they were inherently narcissistic, their behavior went well beyond just having little regard for you, just having insufficient care about you. Their behavior went well beyond that to active abuse and exploitation of you, but carefully veiled or covertly expressed. Their aggressive behavior toward you was masked to look like something else, deliberately, consciously masked. So they were rightfully labeled covert aggressive. I've seen and heard these types of people described in any number of ways, including perhaps the most ridiculous description of all, covert passive-aggressive narcissist? Well, there's nothing passive in covert aggression. Covert aggression is very active, deliberate aggression, designed to do you in, designed to get the better of you, designed to get you to capitulate, to see things the other person's way, to cave in to their demands. This is very active, very deliberate. It's just done under cover. That's what makes it covert, and it's definitely aggression. There's nothing passive about it. And narcissism, by its very nature, is hard to keep under cover, although you cannot see it. The features of narcissism, the main features of narcissism, an excessive self-focus or egocentricity, a desire to be always right or to be seen as always right, an insensitivity toward others, a lack of heart, a lack of caring, easy justification of hurtful behavior. These things are almost impossible to hide, although you may not pay them sufficient attention at the outset of a relationship if the person is a good impression manager. And that's what makes all the different types of narcissism so worthy of note. And that's why I've written so much about the various types of narcissism, some of which are much more benign in a way than others. So I want to talk about a couple of those today, as I've talked about them before, but just to re-emphasize. We know from research, and I knew early on in my own research years ago, before writing my first two books, we know solidly that there are two major types of narcissists, very different from one another. One major category is what the research calls the more vulnerable type, that we used to call the more neurotic type. These are individuals that are always trying to prove their worth because underneath it all, they don't feel very worthy. So sometimes they act in a way that seeks to be seen as special, when underneath they don't feel like much at all. This type of narcissist is relatively benign. They can still do a lot of harm, but on balance, there's hope for these folks because of the pain and hurt underneath their self-presentation. But then there are the more common type these days, especially, unfortunately, a major type called the grandiose type. These are the folks who don't just want to be seen as special because they, underneath it all, don't feel very special, but these are the folks who already feel special, who sincerely believe in their special status, who don't seek to be admired to mend an inner wound, but demand being adulated because they really feel superior to others. These grandiose types are very different in character. They lack empathy. They lack even the capacity for empathy. They can't care, so they don't care. And they're very, very different in relationships, much more toxic. So these are two very different major types of narcissists that many of the books and articles out there do not distinguish between. And among the more benign types, the more neurotic, but less character disturbed types, are some really amiable personalities. I've written on my blog articles about the charmers among us. The vulnerable, amiable, charming narcissist. The amorous types, those folks that can make you love them and who love to be loved. and who can charm the socks off of you, but will inevitably, at some point in time, reveal their self-centeredness and their lack of capacity to genuinely love you. Yes, there are those amorous types, the types that know how to woo and seduce, those types that can make you feel at the outset of a relationship that it's all about you, when in fact it's really always about them. They make you think that it's all about the love they want to give, when it's really all about the adulation that they expect and hope to receive. You don't realize this until it's too late. Still, these types are among the more benign types. So even though they are relatively benign types, and even though they seem to be able to win friends and influence people, so to speak, they can be problematic. But they're not as toxic and they're not as problematic as the more heartless types, whose sole purpose is to exploit you, whose sole purpose is to take advantage of you, to use you, maybe to bolster their own already inflated self-image, maybe to exploit your generosity, your good nature, your forgiving nature, maybe to take advantage of your overly conscientious character, the fact that you have a solid moral compass and will take care of things, manage affairs responsibly while they act a fool, always counting on you to pick up the pieces. So these days, it's not as simple as a lot of the information out there suggests, unfortunately. Character disturbance is a huge problem. It's widespread, but it has many different faces. And narcissism of various types is just part of the picture. And that's why I've written so much about all these things. On my blog at drgeorgesimon.com, you'll find a treasure trove of articles about all of the subjects that I've talked about, all the matters of concern related to the character dysfunction in our time and how it has so negatively impacted our relationships, our social affairs, and every other affair. And then, of course, there are my books, most of which I've written to help folks who are in troubled relationships get their feet back under them, discover the truth, understand what they've been dealing with, and know how to deal with it more effectively so that they can empower themselves and carve out for themselves a healthier, richer, more joy-filled life. And then my latest offering, meant to do two things: essentials for the journey, embracing and living the 10 commandments of character, is meant to do two things to help all of those folks who want to continue to grow in character, to be better and to do better, but who are already doing pretty well, become everything that they have the potential to be truly awakened, to make the maximal contribution, and then also to help those folks who have come to that point in their life, as some do, when they realize that the way that they have been conducting their affairs and the way that they have been approaching life and dealing with people just isn't working so well anymore. And maybe, just maybe, they need to develop a stronger, better, more evolved inner moral compass. The book is meant to help them discover just what it would take to grow and become a better person. So whether it's the individual who's looking to just be better, or the individual who has come to realize they just can't keep doing what they have done for so many years, hurting people along the way, creating messes along the way. Either way, my latest offering is meant to help change things in this character-disturbed world of ours the only way that it can possibly change, and that is one heart at a time. That's the only way we can get ourselves out of this mess, to restore wholesomeness to our relationships, to restore sanity to our social lives. Character always has been and always will be the answer. We can't place our faith in anything else, but we've forgotten not only its importance, we have forgotten what it takes to instill it, to develop it, to nurture it, and especially to reinforce it. We have to reclaim that ability. And when we do, this age of narcissism in all of its forms, from its most relatively benign forms to its most seriously malignant and destructive and toxic forms, this age of narcissism will finally come to a close and will usher in a new age of greater love, compassion, productivity, creativity, and wholesomeness. It all hinges on character and its development. So once again, I ask you to avail yourself of the many articles on the blog at drgeorgesimon.com and of all my books, especially my most recent one, Essentials for the Journey, Embracing and Living the 10 Commandments of Character, Proven Principles for a Psychologically Healthy and Spiritually Rich Life. So until next time, on another edition of the New Character Matters, I'm Dr. George Simon, thanking you for tuning in. See you next time. Take care.